Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Million Pound Mission Podcast. It's your buddy Adam, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and this is episode number 372. We're talking about the health advantages of salt with my friend Darryl Bosshardt from Redmond Real Salt. We're going to dive into that in just a second. A few brief announcements. We are doing a giveaway this week. Our friends at Energy Bits are helping us out. So there are 3 simple steps to the giveaway. All you have to do is take a screenshot of a Million Pound Mission Podcast episode, share it on your Instagram story, and then tag my account at Million Pound Mission, and you'll be entered to win every time you do that. This week, I will announce the winner on my Instagram account a week from today, so that will be the 14th of December. So you can enter every single day, once per day, and we'll be giving away a Energy Bits giveaway package. Also, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, our good friends at KetoBrick, ketobrick.com. That's where you need to go if you're living that low-carb lifestyle and you need to fill in those macros in a perfect way. This is a 1,000-calorie brick of deliciousness with flavors like toasted almond coconut, cookies and cream. We got mocha. We've got peanut butter, chocolate malt, all of my faves. I don't go a day without putting a keto brick in my body because it's perfect macro breakdown. It tastes delicious. It's clean fuel for the ketogenic lifestyle. Head on over to ketobrick.com and make sure that you use the code MPM, like Million Pound Mission, MPM at checkout. That will get you entered to win a free month of Keto Bricks. Just imagine you'll be making it rain with those bricks. Thanks again for all of you that go and check out ketobrick.com. That really helps support the show. Speaking of supporting the show, I put an announcement out there last week. I've had some feedback. I had some people freaking out a little bit. It's all good, my friends. We have 4 episodes left, counting this one, of the Million Pound Mission Podcast. I'll be giving you more updates as we get closer to the new year and the new show. I'm rebranding, so you won't have to do anything as far as like subscribing to a new show or anything like that. You'll just stay right here. It'll transform that first week of January into a brand new show, and I am going to have more than one co-host. Maybe we should do a little contest to see who can guess who my co-hosts will be. So I'm going to niche down a little bit, and we're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be fun. I'm excited about this. Of course, finalizing this show, it'll be episode 375 will be the final one. And I've got interviews for this week and then the next 2 weeks. And that final episode will just be me and you. I'm going to be talking about the transition, what we're going to be transitioning into, why I'm doing it, and all the details shall be revealed that final week, that final episode of the year. So I'm excited about that. And don't worry, you guys will be well taken care of, my friends. All right, let's talk about this week's episode. We're talking about the health advantages of salt. And I know for a fact that some of you, or a lot of you, have heard from sometimes medical professionals that salt is bad for you. And this week, I hope to provide you with an opportunity for a new perspective on how important salt is to our overall health. I'm bringing in my friend Darryl Bosshardt from Redmond Real Salt to set the record straight and show us how we can maximize our health with salt. So in this episode, we dive into the story of the world-famous salt cave that is in Redmond, Utah. I totally want to go to the salt cave. Like I'm all in. We talk about the key differences between the various types of salt, and this makes a big difference. We talk about salt consumption and if it can negatively impact our blood pressure. We hear that a lot. I've been, salt phobic in my health journey for sure. And then we talk about the importance of using salt, especially if you're living a low-carb lifestyle. This one is really interesting. I know when you read the title, you're like, salt, I put it on my chicken and good to go. but we really dive into the importance of it, the type of salt. Like, I really think you're going to be fascinated with this one. It's going to be one of those sneaky good ones that maybe you reluctantly start to listen to, but then you're like, damn, that was really cool. That was super neat. So that's my guarantee on this one. You're going to be blown away by how cool this discussion is. So let's not delay anymore, my friends. Let's dive into episode number 372, The Health Advantages of Salt, with my friend Darryl Bosshardt. All right, Darryl, welcome to the Million Pound Mission podcast. How are we doing today, my friend?
Really good, Adam. Thanks for having me on your program.
Well, I'm really excited. As I briefly mentioned earlier before we started recording, I'm a huge fan of your brand, Redmond Real Salt, and you've turned me into a total salt snob. Like, I get sent free product all the time, and somebody sent me something that I would consider to be in the same lane as your Relight product, and I literally threw it away because I'm like, it just didn't taste good. It seemed like the quality wasn't there. So you guys I'm really on board with what you've got. I've been a fan of you guys since the previous KetoCon. I got to talk to a lot of your people. I see you guys at events. I love the culture that you've got around the brand. So I'm really excited to have you here today, man.
Well, thank you, Adam. I'm just excited to meet more of your audience, and we've got a lot of fun things to talk about today.
Yeah, well, let's dive into kind of the origin story. I really want to hear the story about this world famous salt cave in Utah that has magical powers and it will turn the clock back 20 years time if you enter it. No, maybe those aren't totally factual, but I would love to hear the story about how you guys all got started as a brand, and I do want to hear about the cave a little bit because I think it sounds awesome.
Well, when people hear of salt in Utah, the first thing they typically think of is the Great Salt Lake. But many people forget or don't know that 2 hours south of the Great Salt Lake, there's an ancient seabed that was laid down long before the Dead Sea, or long before the Dead Sea in Utah, which was Bonneville, long before the Great Salt Lake, which is in Utah. There was this inland sea, geologists say 150 to 250 million years ago. And this ancient seabed called the Sundance Sea was then covered over with volcanic ash and soil and trapped deep within the earth. And so now you have this pristine seabed from the Jurassic era that's now hidden below the earth. And as Utah was compressed and the mountains of the Wasatch Range were pushed up and the Ochres here in Utah were pushed up, this salt deposit that's now 5,000 feet down at what used to be sea level has been pushed up and comes to the surface in this little town called Redmond, or Red Mound, because there's these three red mounds behind the town that were pushed up when this salt dome, the salt itself is about a quarter mile wide, 3 miles long, and about 5,000 feet deep. And at 5,000 feet, the deposit turns and goes horizontal again. And so the seabed that was, laid down in the Jurassic era, long before we had the toxic rain and pollution and microbeads in the ocean and pharmaceuticals and the BP oil spill and Exxon Valdez and the Japan disaster, this ancient seabed was trapped and preserved for eons. And then as the settlers are moving west and, kind of settling and discovering the West, these settlers came into this valley and they saw that the Native Americans had been harvesting this salt that was close to the surface, and the local animals, the deer were licking and pawing at the surface. And so they moved the soil out of the way. And what they found was this ancient mineral salt that this is a piece out of the deposit. Kind of a rose quartz color. And the salt and the minerals were trapped and then pushed up or extruded up near the surface. And so in 1958, my grandfather and his brother had a farm on top of this area, and they knew there was a little outcropping of salt north and south of the farm. And so there was a drought and the farm wasn't doing very well. So they dug down and developed the salt mine right on the center of this ancient seabed. And so as they started selling it initially, it was mostly for local farmers to feed their cows. And they noticed that the cows loved this natural mineral salt better than the processed blocks that are pretty common even today. And the family would eat the salt because it tasted better than the stuff in the store. but never really sold it for food salt. It wasn't until the health food movement kind of started taking off in the 70s that a nutritionist from California came through the area. And I think he was coming to see the Grand Canyon or something, and we're north of there quite a ways. But coming through the area, visited the deposit, and then wrote an article about the healthiest, tastiest salt in the U.S. was in this little deposit in Redmond, Utah. And
Wow.
so people started calling and saying, hey, we want to buy your salt. And we said, great, you want it for your roads or for your cows? And they said, no, we want it for our health food store. And so we said, well, we need to have a better name than just Redmond. And it's not fake salt, it's not half salt, it's just real salt. And the name stuck, and now here we are today.
Redmond Real Salt. Man, what a cool story. I didn't know that whole thing. I've never heard it told like that. That's impressive. So like, this is salt that's around during the dinosaurs, as the dinosaurs roamed the earth, and like T-Rexes could have been feeding off of this salt. Who knows? But like you said, it's pristine and it's preserved, and there's not all this junk and all this toxic exposure. I mean, the first time I tasted Redmond Real Salt was at KetoCon, and I asked, well, what else is in it? Because it tastes like something else is in it. It doesn't, it has flavor to it that I've never even thought about salt as having a flavor. This has like a real flavor to it. So is that where that is coming from? Is just the fact that this is just untouched, pristine, unprocessed salt?
You're absolutely right. The closest thing I can liken it to is if all you'd ever eaten was a tomato in the off season out of a grocery store, and then the first time you tasted a really ripe garden tomato, and the difference is phenomenal. And then you go back, if you try to go back, if you've been raising your own tomatoes in your backyard, and you have that really rich tomato flavor, and then you go into a sandwich shop and they give you a tomato that is grown in the off season in different conditions, that tomato has no flavor or bad flavor. And salt is the same way. Salt should bring out subtle nuances and should bring out these micro flavors as it highlights the flavor of the food. It shouldn't mask the flavor of the food. But today, and we can talk about this a little bit later, most salts are so processed that salt has this very bitter salt flavor that we've come to associate with salt. But salt, when it's in its natural form, should have a very sweet and pleasant salt flavor that actually it brings out these nuances, doesn't mask the flavors of food with this bitter salt that we've come to associate with table salt.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what are the differences between Redmond salt and, like pink salt, red salt, all these different types of salts? Like, what are some of the key differentiating factors between all those and what you guys produce at Redmond?
That's a great question. So there's really, well, whenever somebody asks me, what are the questions that I should ask when I'm trying to find a good salt? There's three that I point people to. And I think these three questions are the same questions you should be asking if you're buying eggs at the farmer's market, or you're sourcing seafood for your dinner, or you're buying salt. And the first question is, who is producing it? And I think that's a really important question today. And it's getting harder and harder to find the answer with certain foods, because oftentimes the food changes hands so many times, it's really hard to track down who the person is, who's the farmer, who's the harvester, who is it that's really producing the food. And with salt, that's increasingly difficult, because if you go into a super box store and you just buy a salt shaker off the counter, even if it's a sea salt or a pink salt or a black salt or new salt or smoked salt or whatever, knowing exactly where that salt crystal originated is almost impossible. Did it come from the Gulf of Mexico? Did it come from the Sea of Japan? Did it come from the San Francisco Bay or the Hudson or this Brittany, France, or the Mediterranean? And this is really important today because, unfortunately, and this actually leads to the second question. So the first question is who's producing it? So you actually can put a face behind it. And are they using fair labor practices, sustainability, all of these social questions on who is producing it. And the second part of that is, if you know who's producing it, you can find the source. And the source, salt, for our kitchen tables, it can come from a lot of different places, but really it's coming from either an ancient seabed, like the pink salt from Pakistan, or the pink salt from Bolivia, or the Redmond Real Salt from Utah. It can come from a dead sea, like the Dead Sea in Israel, or the Dead Sea here in Utah called the Great Salt Lake, or it can come from a current ocean. And it's going to come from one of those three places. The challenge is, with each of those, you still need to know who's producing it, because if it's coming from a current ocean, unfortunately, we humans haven't been the best stewards of this planet we call Earth. And we have the BP spill in the Gulf. We have the Exxon Valdez issue. And, having an ocean where you've got chemicals being pumped into it is like having a pee only section in the local swimming pool. And it doesn't take long. Water is the universal solvent. So even if you have a pee only section in the pool, eventually it's going to be distributed throughout. And so today our oceans, we have microbeads and plastics, and there's articles, if you look up online, you can Google search microbeads in salt, and you can see under a microscope little beads of plastic now in some of the sea salts, because of the way a lot of these shampoos and body products have these little microbeads that don't break down. They end up in the sewers, they end up in the oceans. And now we have fish and wildlife and waterfowl that have these microbeads and plastics in their bodies, because it's so common in our oceans today. So the source would be the second thing. And then the third thing, and probably the most important in my opinion, is know the process. So know who's producing it, know the source, know the process. When it comes to salt, there's really two factors that we need to be concerned with. Now, when we look at salt in the ocean, salt is a complex chloride. So we have sodium chloride, potassium chloride, magnesium chloride. Then we have trace amounts of a bunch of other elements in the oceans: magnesium, calcium, phosphorus. Those are there. But we also have zinc, selenium, iodine, iron, manganese, zinc. So all of these other micronutrients and microminerals are in the ocean water. Well, if we go back to our tomato example, tomato is rich in a lot of nutrients. And if we took a tomato and we subtracted or drew out all the micronutrients and then sold you this red fruit, after we've extracted the nutrients, you're not getting the same value. Same thing with an orange. If we took an orange and we extracted the ascorbic acid and the vitamin C complex from the orange, then we've changed the nature of that orange. And salt's the same way. So salt occurs with these complex chlorides. Now, that's important because the body, as you know, for the sodium-potassium pump, our bodies require potassium to digest sodium. And these other electrolytes, magnesium, calcium, are super essential for the body to process not only the other electrolytes, but sodium specifically. And so if we take seawater that has these other electrolytes, calcium, magnesium, potassium, we can take that seawater and now we can put a different membrane or liner. So seawater occurs at about 3% salt. And seawater can hold a maximum, or water can hold a maximum of 26% salt. So if we pull the seawater off the ocean and start to evaporate it, it'll go from 3% salt to 4 to 5. At 26%, the salt will start to fall out of the solution onto the bottom of this pond, and then you can rake those salt crystals up. So if we use different membranes or liners in that pond, we can get the potassium chloride to come off first, and we can move all the water over to the next pond, put a different liner in it, and leach out the potassium or the calcium chloride and the magnesium chloride. And now with this salt that's left over, but it's not the way the salt was created by nature. And these other chlorides have flavor. And so not only does this leaching out of the other complex chlorides cause some health problems, potentially, it also causes some flavor problems. So that's the first question is are they taking anything out? And if maybe you're a fan of raw milk and you've got a great grass-fed raw milk producer, if you take the raw milk and you subtract out the cream and the fat, and you sell that off for butter and cream, and then you have the leftover white solution left over, that's no longer milk, right? At least not milk like nature created. And so many salt companies do that same thing. They can extract off the complex chlorides, sell them off to a vitamin company, a manufacturing company, and then still sell the table salt left over as salt. But it would be like, taking apart the best parts of the milk and then selling the leftovers as milk.
Yeah. God, that's crazy. What a great explanation too. Like that, I can really see that picture happen. Like, okay, this totally makes sense now. And it makes sense why it tastes different. And also just the fact, like, you feel the difference too. Like my friend Robert Sykes, Keto Savage, the man behind the Keto Brick, like he talks about all the time. Like his people ask him, like, what's your intro workout, drink that you use, or what do you use for your workouts? He's like, I just do shots of Redmond Real Salt during my workout. And he's like, it works great. I get a pump and I'm fully hydrated. I got great energy. So I started doing that. I'm like, holy cow, this really does work. Like it's like, you can tell the difference. But now, Darryl, I showed you my picture from being a heavier individual. And, one thing as I went on my weight loss journey, and I think a lot of people on a weight loss journey, we kind of become salt phobic because if we've had like blood pressure issues in the past, like when I was bigger, I had blood pressure issues, and you hear everybody saying, oh, you got to watch the salt because the blood pressure is going to go crazy. Now, the interesting thing was when I switched to keto, I still had that mindset of like, I got to keep my salt as low as possible. And I had like the worst keto flu ever because of those low salt levels. And as soon as I started really mega dosing Redmond Real Salt, cramps went away, the heart palpitations went away, the headaches went away, the energy picked up, my workouts returned to normal, and I felt amazing. Like that was the missing link for me, was the salt with my keto. So can you talk a little bit about the people, or maybe talk about some of the concerns people would have that are a little bit salt phobic when it comes to blood pressure, and how you would suggest to navigate those waters a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So a couple disclaimers or notices before we go too far down. That one is, I'm not a doctor. I don't try to make any medical claims. I have brothers. I got a brother who's an MD. I got a brother who's a chiropractor. I rely a lot on science and just don't want to give anybody medical advice. The second thing is most people. There are very few people that are actually salt sensitive. It's a very small percentage of the population. And if you are that person, then you can take what I say with a grain of salt. And the second thing is that if you are on dialysis or kidney failure, ignore absolutely everything I'm going to say. Because if you have healthy kidneys, you can process copious amounts of salt. If you are in dialysis or kidney failure, ignore what I'm going to tell you next. So with that in mind, when you go to the hospital and you get an IV, or if you call the EMTs and they come to your house and they give you an IV, the IV they give you is going to be an IV of saline solution, which is 0.9% salt and water. Now, if you're in the hospital for very long, they'll probably give you an IV called lactated ringers, which has not only sodium chloride, but also potassium chloride and magnesium chloride added to it because of the way the electrolytes offset that. But my point is, you would never get an IV of distilled water or tap water because it would actually kill you. Your cells would start to atrophy and rupture. And so our bodies are saline solution in motion, and we absolutely have to have salt to live. If salt were this white poison that was going to kill us, we wouldn't get an IV intravenously in every hospital in the world.
Right.
And so with that in mind, if you have salt and you have water in the right ratios, you can't overdose on salt. You might need an IV, or you might need a catheter if you're pumping that many fluids. But if it's balanced, that's how your body lives. If you ever tasted your tears are salty. Your sweat is salty. And take my word for it, your urine is salty. You could try it if you want to, but trust me on that one. And so as we are losing salt, as we're doing anything that we're doing, sweating, working, urinating, our bodies are flushing salt. And if you don't replace those, hyponatremia sets in, and actually you die from low salt because you have to have that salt to function. Now, what's interesting, especially when we kind of talk about the keto side, is, as you know, when you switch to that keto, when you get that keto flu, glycogen that's stored in our muscles and our liver, when glycogen is burned, 1 gram of glycogen has 3 to 4 grams of water attached to it. And so when we switch over and we start burning that glycogen, the reason that quick weight loss happens so fast in that first few days is because we're flushing all that water that's attached to all of that glycogen. And so in our bodies, we have to have salt or it causes a myriad of problems. And so those that are worried about salt or they've heard, hey, need to switch to a low salt diet. For most people, the problem is actually either the carb heavy processed stuff that's attached to salt, or it's the diet that we've had that is just so processed salt that it impacts the way it reacts to the body. So when you have a craving that you think is salty, I've got a salt craving, or maybe you're saying I'm craving potato chips, you're not craving the fried chip. What you're craving is natural salt because our bodies are just naturally low in it. So on my kitchen table, I've got a dish, and you probably can't see it very well, but I have a dish of just salt crystals.
Nice.
I don't want to dump it on my laptop, but these are just salt crystals about the size of a peppercorn. And so when I walk past that dish on my kitchen table, I'll just put a piece of salt in my mouth. And if salt tastes sweet, like it does right now, it tastes really good. It's probably because I'm a little low on my salt consumption.
Interesting.
And by the time I get the third or fourth piece, it's going to taste much more salty. And if we listen to our body's cravings, it's like water. When your body's craving water, that first sip is like, oh my word, the water never tasted so good. By maybe the third or fourth glass, that amazing craving sensation and how refreshing that water is gone. And if we listen to our bodies, salt does the same thing.
I've never thought about it that way, like that. And again, like I could totally see how that 100% makes sense. And I'm gonna try that too. Like I do shots of my Redmond shaker kind of throughout the day, and I'm gonna test that a little bit. Just like I've never paid attention to the taste. I'm always like this just tastes amazing. I'm all about it. And no, that's really, really cool. Now with the low carb lifestyle, we started to dive into that a little bit. Like people always ask me like, okay, I get we need salt because of keto flu. What's like the suggested amount, or like what's a good baseline amount when we talk about servings of salt? Because people are kind of all over the place on that as well. What recommendation would you make if somebody's just getting into a low carb lifestyle keto diet? Like how many grams of salt should we be aiming for per day? Like ballpark figure.
Great question. So I like to default to 2 books. One book is called Your Body's Many Cries for Water. It was written years ago by a guy named Dr. Batman Gelly. And then there was another book that was written called Salt Your Way to Health by Dr. David Brownstein in the Midwest. And then there was another book more recently called The Salt Fix by Dr. James DiNicolantonio. And all of these authors kind of use the same formula. And they say, most people, and you might, agree with this, are walking around dehydrated. People aren't drinking near enough water. We get busy, we forget, we don't want to get up in the middle of the night and use the bathroom. For whatever reason, we're not drinking enough water. Or maybe we're drinking a bunch of other stuff, and so we don't feel thirsty, and so we're not getting the water that we need. And so in their books, they say, first off, as a general rule, and again, I know there's a lot of opinions on this, but they say about half your body weight in ounces would be a good place for a lot of people to start. Now, if you're sweating hard and working out in the gym and burning tons, you might need to drink more. Maybe your body might need a little less. But if I'm 150 pounds, that would put me at about 75 ounces of good, clean water a day. And again, if I'm drinking distilled water, which is, there's probably a place for that if we live on a municipal system and we've got pharmaceuticals in the water, distilling or RO water is great because it gets one of the few things that can get rid of a lot of that crap that's in so many of our water supplies. The challenge with that, though, is water being the universal solvent, you aren't going to pee distilled water. So water that's distilled or hungry water or RO water will absorb more minerals as it's going through. And so in addition to just drinking half your body weight in ounces, Dr. Brownstein, Dr. Batman Gelly, Dr. James DiNicolantonio suggest that you add about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt per quart of water that you're drinking to help rebuild those depleted electrolytes. And this is especially important when we start talking about some diet and dietary changes. Back before your weight loss transition, a lot of people at that point, they're eating a lot of processed foods. And one of the ways that manufacturers can extend the shelf life for a processed food is adding copious amounts of salt, because salt is a natural preservative. And so oftentimes when somebody switches from a very processed diet to a more natural diet, their salt consumption actually drops a lot, because now they're eating fresh fruits and vegetables, and they're eating meats, and they're eating like fresh, and they're not getting all of those salt-based preservatives. And so salt consumption generally drops. Now, one of the challenges with salt as a preservative, because most people, again, maybe early on before they make this lifestyle change and they're trying to eat more fresh and more natural, the salt that they're eating, not only is it demineralized, which we just talked about, but the other caveat that's the problem with salt is all of the additives that are put into salt after you've taken out the minerals. Salt is naturally hygroscopic. Hygroscopic means sucks water out of the air. So if I have this salt crystal on my desk in Florida, on a humid day, this is going to be almost dripping wet because it's sucking water out of the air. The problem with that, and it does that because salt's function in the body is to regulate fluids. And so salt is supposed to interact with moisture. That's his job. But if I take those salt crystals and I crush them up and I put them in a shaker, and now I'm in Louisiana where it's nice and humid and I have a natural salt, those salt crystals are going to get damp because it's sucking the water out of the air. When the salt crystals get damp, they won't pour out of the shaker as well. So you either got to add some rice, or you got to take the shaker and tap on it to kind of break up the damp crystals. Well, in the early 1900s, some people sat around and said, hey, we know a lot more about chemistry. We have a lot of chemicals at our disposal. What kind of things could we add to the salt crystal to coat the crystal with to stop the crystals from sticking together? Well, it sounded like a great idea at the time. And the whole campaign was based around, when it's raining outside and it's pouring rain, will the salt still pour out of the shaker? And so they found some chemicals that they could put into the salt, and they made this campaign with the little girl with an umbrella, and it's raining, and she's walking down the street, and the salt is pouring out of the shaker. And the tagline was, when it rains, it pours. Meaning when it rains outside, it pours out of the shaker. Fun idea, fun campaign. The problem, if you haven't already got to the punchline, is salts in the body. Salt is supposed to regulate our body moisture. Salt keeps the intercellular and extracellular fluids in check. Salt attaches to water and helps kidneys and liver and all of the electrolyte functions. The reason that my hand moves is because of an electric current that's passing through my body. And so that salt is so essential for moisture and for our fluid balance, that when you take the salt crystal, and now we found a whole series of chemicals that we can add to the salt to repel moisture. So if you look at the list, if you pick up a salt shaker and you look at the ingredient list, it should have one thing, salt, right? But yet if you look at the ingredients on most salts, especially if you buy it in the grocery store, there's a whole list of chemicals. Things like yellow precipitated soda, sodium ferrocyanide, calcium silicoaluminate, all of these chemicals that are in there to repel moisture and stop the salt crystals from interacting with moisture. And so not only do we need to worry about salt being demineralized, which we talked about a little earlier, but once we add all of these chemicals, which are essentially an anti-moisture, antiperspirant type chemical, and then we eat a lot of that that's attached to foods, we start to have some problems. And if you or I took 2 licks of our antiperspirant every morning before breakfast, we're going to have some problems. And yet we put those same type of chemicals in our salt, and we put them on our eggs, and then we put them on our pasta or our kale chips or almonds, whatever we're eating. And we have demineralized salt that has chemicals on it. And then we wonder why, salt and salty foods are a problem, when our bodies have to have salt to live, but the nature of salt and the food that it's on makes a big difference.
And yeah, I mean, that from a medical perspective, it's not the doctors shouldn't be hating on salt. It should be on the type of salt and the processing of the salt and the additives of the salt and what the quality is doing to the chemistry inside your body. So that totally makes sense. Now, I absolutely cannot let you escape my grasp here, Darryl, until we talk about, I mean, it's got to be one, the keto brick is up there, but this is like neck and neck with like my favorite nutritional product, and that is Relight. It's been a game changer for me. It's been a game changer for my family. A couple of months back, I did an Instagram TV product review of Relight, and I kind of put a challenge out there. I'm like, just try it, and just tell me your first workout, how you feel. Because that's like one of the products that's not caffeinated. Like there's no stimulants in it. It's just natural electrolytes. I put it in my body and I instantly felt better, more mentally clear. My workout was amazing. My body operated more effectively. Then I start giving it to my son, a half a scoop a day in his water that he takes to school. My son has suffered from migraines. He's 10 years old now, like his whole life. He's had migraines his whole life. And we track like how often he has them. And since he's been doing Relight, he's at like 25% of the migraines he had this time last year over year. And it's just huge. Like that's making a huge difference in his quality of life. Like that's big time. So Relight's made a big difference for us. I would love for you to talk about that product specifically, like that, what's in it, why it works so well. And I will keep singing its praises.
Well, thank you very much. And, one of the keys we talked about earlier is how essential electrolytes are for our body. And if you focus on any single electrolyte, it can throw the other electrolytes out of balance. And so if you were just to take a single potassium supplement or single calcium, and, even calcium is a good example because we know that calcium and vitamin D work together, and you need a balance of all these electrolytes, not just focusing on just sodium or just. And so for years, being around the salt, we've had that same experience that you did. You take a real salt shot and you get this burst of energy. The body realizes that these good electrolytes are coming, and so it releases the other electrolytes that are there. Our body's going to preservation mode when we're low on salt or low on sugar. Whatever it is that our bodies are low on, it tries to hold on to that, because in the absence of all salt, you die. And so it holds on to those when it starts getting low. When you taste salt, the body knows more salt's coming, and so it releases those and gives you that pick-me-up. And so for years, I would give these podcasts and we'd talk about the importance of salt and electrolytes, and the only other real product on the market was crappy food coloring heavy, sugar heavy sports drinks. And sports, there was the Florida Gators who realized the importance early on of water and electrolytes. And this idea that, I love mountain biking and I ski a lot in the wintertime. And when you're mountain biking and you're sweating hard and you start feeling a cramp, fill in your leg, it's because the body is low on water and salt, and you start to have these cramps. And so I would always take a little bit of salt with me, and I put it under my tongue and a big glass of water. And when my kids would be involved in, little league sports, we would, take a quart of water, add a quarter teaspoon of salt, a little squeeze of lemon to make it flavorful. And they could have, I told people at these in presentations, you can make the best sports drink for pennies on the dollar. Just take a quart of water, quarter teaspoon of natural mineral salt, real salt, a squeeze of lemon, and better than any of those pink, purple, whatever sports drinks are out there. The challenge is, as you know, as an athlete, sometimes we're burning through electrolytes in a little bit different ratio than just found in salt. And the other factor is sometimes when you're working out, yes, you could do it for cheaper and mix up your own in a quart of water and a scoop of this and a little bit of lemon, but it's kind of a pain. And so because of that, we thought we want a product that has the base, this natural mineral salt, over 60 minerals, and the base is a sodium and chloride-based salt. But we also need high levels of potassium, high levels of calcium, high levels of magnesium, higher than is in just seawater. And yeah, you could have the seawater and then, try to, get an orange and a banana and the other, try to build this perfect electrolyte cocktail. But as you're heading to the gym, eating your banana, eating your orange, eating the, drinking the salt, becomes a little more of a pain. And so we said, let's get the best, tastiest, healthiest electrolyte replacement drink that we can find, one that would feel good about using for ourselves, would feel good about our kids taking to school with them. And that's how Relight was born. And the idea of Relight was just re-electrolyte, because electrolytes we know are essential for health. We're burning through them all the time. And so that's how it was born. And it has the real salt as the base, with potassium, calcium, magnesium, a little of that added to it. And it doesn't have all the sugars that'll spike the sugar levels in the body. Have a few flavors out there. We've got some new flavors in the works. And whether you're roofing and you're in the sun all day in the hot Nevada desert, whether you're a logger or a forest firefighter here in Colorado, Utah, California, or you're just working hard in the garden or the backyard all day, it's a great way to replace those lost electrolytes. And the same thing, when you taste it, you can taste if you mix it up. And I think, I use about a half a scoop as well, or I have a bigger bottle of water, because I think it's a little strong. So it goes a long way. But as your salt levels increase, that pleasure or enjoyment sensation decreases. And so again, I really like that idea of listening to your body talk and being aware of our cravings. And oftentimes when we're craving potato chips or we're craving a sweet treat, we're really craving water and salt. And so I like to start there. And most of the time that'll satisfy the craving. And if not, then it's easy to, okay, what is it that my body is low in?
Now, just a couple of thoughts for those of you that are interested in trying this out. I highly recommend it. The lemon lime is my jam. Like, it is so much better than lemon lime Gatorade. And that is like the ultimate Gatorade flavor. I feel like it's the old school lemon lime, and 0 carbs, no sugar. Like, it's perfect for those doing low carb keto. And like, my son plays basketball. I will never put Gatorade, Powerade, any of that stuff in his body. I'll put Relight in his body, because 0 carb, 0 sugar, just the stuff that he needs, just the electrolytes. And he loves it. And so another thought, I know a lot of people are out there working out, like real hard and heavy strength training, like I like to get into, like my friends, Danny Vega, Robert Sykes, they get into, Jamie Seaman. And a lot of us consume caffeine first thing in the morning, and we're working out early, and caffeine will naturally dehydrate us. So what I found to kind of be my jam is I wake my body up with a little bit of caffeine first thing in the morning, but then I'll do 24 to 32 ounces of water with a half a scoop to a scoop of Relight in it. I'll drink all of that before I even start my workout, so that my muscles are fully hydrated. I have an amazing workout because I'm kind of stimulated from the caffeine. My body is ready to go to work because I'm fully hydrated with my electrolytes. I have amazing sessions. Maybe I'll add another half scoop, or I'll do some salt shots during the workout. But man, it's a noticeable difference. And I've been in the game long enough to know, like, when something's affecting my body and when I just kind of think it is, like, this really works. So, kudos to you and the team there, Darryl. I mean, you really crushed it with this product.
Well, and you mentioned the lemon lime. That's actually my favorite as well. But and we also have one that's unsweetened at all. So in most of the Relights, there is stevia. And I'm a guy that typically hates stevia, that stevia bite. But when you have the stevia that mixed with that natural sweet real salt, you don't get that typical stevia.
Yep.
That I'm not a big fan of. But even just the unsweetened, it tastes a bit like coconut water, a little bit to me. You can tell it has a very soft, because of those electrolytes and minerals in there. But even the unsweetened, I'm a big fan of.
Nice, for the hardcore. Well, Darryl, I want to make sure that people can get plugged into your world and all the things that you guys have going on at Redmond. So what is the best way to get more information on things like Relight or Real Salt, or any of the other things you got cooking, like the new flavors, man? That perked my ears up right there. I'm like, oh, new flavors. Let's get it going, brother. So yeah, how do people get plugged into your world?
So if they want to know more just on salt in general, the easiest URL to remember is just realsalt.com. It's not fake salt, it's just realsalt.com. That brings up all of the information on the salt we talked about today. We've got some fun videos there, some more information. And then for that expanded look at our product line, it's Redmond, Redmond, Redmond.life. And that has not only the salts, but then you can see the electrolyte, the Relight products, our Redmond clay, some of our body care items as well. So realsalt.com is more focused just on the salt side. And then redmond.life brings that whole family of natural, clean, healthy products.
Nice. And just so you guys know as well, like I'm an affiliate of Redmond. Like I reached out to them about that after I started loving the products. I'll put my link in the show notes. And if you use that, I do get compensated for that. So that's much appreciated. It's a great way to support the show. Now, Darryl, I love to end the podcast with a little bit of momentum, get our people into action. You're somebody that's been in the health industry for a while, like your family and like you're a part of this deal. So a lot of people listening to this show, they're on that journey. They're on that quest. They're out there looking to reclaim control over their health. So if you could just look one of those people in the eye and just give them something to inspire them or something to think about or an action step to take, like in the next 24 hours, what would you look in their eye and tell them here today?
I'd say live intentionally. I think oftentimes we have so many goals that we try to force ourselves to do this and do this and do that. I think if we can just create awareness and start to think differently, that thinking differently and living intentionally brings about all of these other lifestyle changes that we want to have happen by just taking baby steps and trying to live intentionally. And that can be, putting yourself in the place of most potential and maybe not focusing on, I messed up here, I need to do better here, but just trying to live intentionally. To me, not only in life, in food and diet and health, but I think if we all tried to live a little more intentionally and thoughtfully, our world would be a lot better place.
Much agreed, Darryl. Much agreed. Wise words, my friend. Well, again, thank you so much for what you and the company are putting out there. It's making an impact on a lot of people. It's helping a lot of us get healthier, and it's, aiding us along in our health quest. So I know you're a busy individual and you could have been a lot of places. So I appreciate the time you invested here in this conversation, Darryl.
Adam, it's been so fun visiting with you. I really hope to meet you one day and give you a tour of the salt mine when you're out this way. So really appreciate all you're doing, and good luck on the 1 million pound mission. I think you're off to an amazing start, 60,000 plus pounds in. You're really, changing lives and making a big difference. So thanks for all you're doing there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've given you a lot of things to think about. Now it's time to implement. Set those implementation alarms on your phone for 24-hour period from right now. So 24 hours from right now, what is that one action step that you're going to take where you're going to flick over that first domino to create momentum in the direction where you are a healthier individual? And then we get out there and own it every meal, every workout, every day. I will see you on the next episode. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you got a ton out of it. If you feel like you need a little bit of a boost, a little bit of an accountability buddy, a little bit of coaching, I've got my 28-day coaching program open and ready to help. You can go to millionpoundmission.com and apply. I take a few people each week. I like to stagger them out as we onboard new people so you get maximum attention. We're touching base every week with video chats. We've got a daily Google Doc that I call the Client Hub that we check in with on a daily basis. We really dig in with your macros, your calories, your fitness. I supply all the resources you need in all those areas, and it's supportive accountability to help you burst through that plateau, to reverse your momentum from negative to positive, and really get after those goals that you've been shooting for so long. It's time to go from goal setting to goal achieving, and the 28-day coaching program is the way to get it done. Head on over to millionpoundmission.com and submit your application today.